All right, we are back with DTR's YouTube channel. Thanks to everybody who's been tuning in and checking out the videos and following along with all the different projects, which is kind of the point of these videos, to demonstrate the ins and outs, the real world perspective of what restoration looks like. Trying to debunk the TV myths that everything looks like magic. It's not always like that. Starting with, this car has been sitting for a number of weeks now because of the circumstances with shipping and inventory and so on, that I finally got my right side wheelhouse to install on this side. I was hoping to also get a trunk drop piece. That is still unavailable, so I'll just end up having to make that myself. But since this project started, a lot has been done behind the scenes. The transmission was sent to a transmission shop, and that was gone over, so that's fresh. New torque converter all as well got for that part of the car, so that's ready to go when the time is ready. And the engine was also sent out to an engine shop. That was gone over. The necessary parts and pieces were replaced on that. The engine was in relatively good shape. It was a running engine. There was no real big problems with it. The only problem there again was the customer wanted a aluminum intake, and again, with the times, nobody had them, so he was able to round one up, and now the engine's back, and you know, that's all done. It's good to stay ahead of things on these projects rather than waiting till the day you need them, because you never know, especially now, you never know when you're gonna be waiting for parts. Fortunately, I had some other work that I brought in, and you can see that on some of the other videos I have posted, and that kept me going while I waited for these parts. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to pull my old quarter off, cut the main section of the outer wheelhouse off, install my new wheelhouse, get my quarter back installed. In earlier videos demonstrating this project, or this part of the project, I mentioned to keep the deck lid and the doors installed. Unfortunately, I sent the doors out and fenders and the deck lid for sandblasting. I was hoping to have them back, but again, you know, circumstances sometimes play a role, and I don't have it back. But because I have so many constant points where I have the panel screwed in, that means once I start fitting my wheelhouse, whether the door is on or not, I can still get my quarter back to where it was when the door was on. But I don't want to, I just wanted to clarify this, not to say something in one video of how to do something and then do it differently in another video. There are obviously, you know, this will bring the panel right back to where it belongs. The big key for this is this line down in the bottom here to line up with the door. But again, as long as the quarter is laying down on the rocker ledge nice and tight, then the door will go right back and line back up perfectly the way it was. So now that I got some metal and I'm able to do this job, let's get to it. Okay, so take a little break and talk about what we've seen. Basically, same procedure that was done in the last video, getting the Wheelhouse fit. What I noticed about the Wheelhouse, I didn't notice it as much the first time, was the differences in the arc between how the car is built for convertible compared to the Wheelhouse, which is designed for a coupe. The structure on the inside for what would make up the convertible area, or the difference between a convertible and a coupe, it doesn't have a nice flowing arc like the Wheelhouse is made. So that's where I ran in. I didn't notice it before as much as I noticed it this time, that how different they really are. And that just presents, for anybody who is going to attempt this on their own, in this type of car, any type of car, the difference between coupes and convertibles, there is differences. And it's a usable piece. It's just a little more work to get it to work. But despite where you saw me finish before I got this back on, I did have to trim the Wheelhouse a few more times. I didn't want it to be just a redundant thing, seeing me trim, but really taking a little off at a time is the safest bet, so you don't go too far, because once you go too far, you ain't coming back. I got my lower front corner down, touching the bottom of the rocker, touching the front edge of the rocker. So that's where it needs to be. And then there's the back half where the flange of the new Wheelhouse marries to the flange of the inner Wheelhouse. And I had some trouble. I didn't say I had some trouble. I had to do some extra trimming to get those two flanges to clamp together very nicely. I had it so far, and I had to clamp pretty hard to get them to touch. But then when I tried to put the quarterback on to test fit it, it was still rolled out too far. So trying to put this on down here, because it was still pushed out, it wasn't coming close to touching. So that told me that I still needed to trim across the top and roll the Wheelhouse in a little bit more. And now that I've done that, I got my screws back in the original holes. One back here, one back here. Where the Wheelhouse comes down, in line with the existing trunk drop, is a nice straight line, so that this will clamp right to it. It'll clamp right to the existing trunk drop. So this Wheelhouse basically is exactly where it needs to be. Well, with that being said, there's still a ton more trimming to do, and then before I even start welding, again, as seen in the video before when I explained this even with more detail. But now that I have the quarter put back on and it's married to the Wheelhouse, when I take this back off, I will then drill some of these type of guide holes and screws, so that when I continue my work, those are going to tell me that the wheelhouse is in the exact spot it needs to be when I'm starting to weld it. I'll have to take the wheelhouse off to punch some plug weld holes in some various spots and things like that, now that it's all trimmed and basically ready to go on. So when I put it back on to start welding, trimming and welding work, putting these screws back in the same holes, it's back in the right spot, and then I could put this right back on and it would fit. So that's where that's at. And it's looking pretty good. So I'm going to continue working and try and get this done. let's take a quick look. So we started with putting our screws in. There was also a screw into the rocker down here, and that is where it was when I had the quarter fit over the top of it. So started by welding these couple spots by my screws to keep that end in place. Welded this in here in place to keep that, and then as you saw, came up and came across. I cut this part because I was able to scribe on the inside from here to here and about here to here because it was against there, and then from this point to this point is where the difference in the coupe wheelhouse is really different, and you can see how the curve was going up and back down to here, where this immediately flattens out and then has these weird jogs to it. But with these relief cuts, you saw I just worked down each little tab. Had to take a little bit of extra metal off, take a little bit off the back edge, so that when it rolled down, it married right up to the existing wheelhouse. So now that's in place. I think what I'm going to do now is keep on welding, and then after I weld, I have to paint the insides of my panels that are going to get buried with some black rust paint. And then once that's all dry, tomorrow I can come back and weld the quarter on. right, so this wheelhouse is pretty much wrapped up, and now I can go ahead and focus on putting my quarter skin back on. So once again, thanks to everybody who has subscribed so far to this channel. If you haven't, please do, and we'll see you in an upcoming video. Thanks again for watching.